Focus is all about guiding your viewer's attention. So, today we're talking about focus. Manual focus. Manual focus gives you full control over what's in and out of focus, how fast you focus, and when you focus. It's also very satisfying when you nail focus yourself, instead of having the camera do it for you with autofocus. We'll go over tools, settings, and best practices. So, grab your camera and let's talk about it. If you're new here, I'm Sebastian and welcome to the channel. First off, there are three sort of manual focus operating modes, depending on the camera and lens used. I'll get to the pros and cons of them in a second, but first let's talk about what they are. There's the obvious one, a fully manual lens like this one, with a focus ring that has hard stops. This is linear focus because the focus distance depends on the position of the ring. Then there are the fly-by-wire lenses that have non-linear focus. This means that how far away or nearby it will focus depends on the speed of rotation, even if the ring is being turned by the same amount. So for example, we can go from close focus to infinity with one little turn of the focus ring, as long as I do it fast enough. But with some camera bodies, some fly-by-wire lenses can be set to behave in a linear way. Both the GH6 and G9 are capable of this, with for example the Panasonic Leica 12-60. This linear setting means that the focus ring behaves more like a manual lens, except for the hard stops, although some can have hard stops as well. Now, in order to be able to manually focus well, which out of three is the best? Definitely a fully manual lens with hard stops. This not only gives us the most accurate control over where the focus is, as well as the speed of focusing, but also makes focus pulls easily repeatable. Second best is the fly-by-wire lens that is compatible with linear behavior. This comes closest to a fully manual lens in terms of ease of use and precision, especially if it also has hard stops. I'll come back to this type of lens in a minute. And the third one is the fly-by-wire lens with non-linear focus. For manual focus, I would stay away from this type of lens for a few reasons. With these lenses, you can very quickly focus from close to far, but realistically, you can't really know where the focus is going to be after you turned the ring, because it depends on how fast you turned it. This makes it very inaccurate for video and basically non-repeatable. Let's first talk about some of the hardware and software stuff before we get into some techniques and best practices. In terms of hardware, there's the follow focus. I've got the small rig mini follow focus, but there are plenty other options on the market. Using this makes for a much more natural position of the hand, and it therefore makes it easier to have precise control while also keeping the camera stable. It also gives us the ability to decide which rotation direction we want to use, depending on our preference and the way it's mounted and the lens used. I, for example, with it mounted on the left, prefer to have the wheel turning clockwise to focus closer and anti-clockwise to focus further away. It also has these thumb screws that we can lock in a position, and if we flip the hard stop down, we can use these screws as hard stop focus points. This is super useful when we have a shot where we can plan the focus pull. It's going to start and stop exactly where you set it. I highly recommend using one of these. It does, however, require the camera to be in a cage to be able to mount it. Another tool we can use is focus peaking. Focus peaking is a tool that highlights areas that are in focus with a particular color. This can be done in most cameras, but also with most external monitors. In addition, we can use the punch-in feature for a closer look at the focus on our subject. The quality of the in-camera focus peaking varies from camera to camera, but in general, it's good enough to get a decent idea of where the focus is at. Usually, we can set the sensitivity and color of the peaking as well. Changing the color can be necessary when we're shooting wildlife, for example, with lots of green in the shot. If the focus peaking is set to green as well, it can be very hard to differentiate. Adjusting the sensitivity settings is something we use depending on the situation. Here on my GH6, setting the sensitivity to -2 will make it less visible but more accurate. Adjusting it to +2 will make it more visible but less precise. It's increasing the threshold of what's considered to be in focus. The G9 has a more basic way of setting sensitivity. It's either high or low, where the high setting is similar to the GH6's -2 setting. Also, as the image gets more noisy at higher ISOs, you may want to decrease the sensitivity because it will start to pick up on the noise. The punch-in feature is especially useful when we're using a very shallow depth of field where focus is critical. Personally, I don't use it all that much. It's usually enough for me to use just the focus peaking.
In-camera peaking and punch-in is great, but using a good external monitor with focus peaking definitely makes it a lot easier to check focus. Not only because the peaking is usually better and more visible, but also because the screen is often better, higher resolution and brighter than the camera's back LCD, which also makes for a higher quality punch-in.
I highly recommend using an external monitor whenever you can. I'm using the Atomos Ninja V for demonstration in this video, but there are plenty external monitors on the market that have good focus peaking. Be aware though that when using the focus peaking on an external monitor, we can't have info display on over HDMI at the same time, because the monitor's focus peaking will see that info as part of the image and the focus peaking will pick up on it. If we do want to have info display on, we have to use the camera's focus peaking sent out over HDMI, which in the case of the GH6 I find basically unusable because it's too weak.
A tool we can use in conjunction with focus peaking is monochrome live view. This again is a tool that is available in cameras like the GH6 and the G9, but also on many external monitors. It's a great way to make the focus peaking much more visible in difficult situations, because the only thing that has color on our screen is the focus peaking. Everything else is grayscale.
So how do we use all of this in practice? And how do we decide where the focus should be? Well, that's entirely up to your creativity. So, for example, this cup of tea is not the main subject of this scene. It's the hand writing in the book. So that's what I'll focus on first. Later, the most important thing is the subject thinking about what she's doing. So I'll pull focus to her face.
What I'm using for this is a manual lens and a follow focus where I preset the A and B point on the focus wheel. I'm using my Ninja V as the external monitor with focus peaking on, and all I have to do is decide on the speed and timing of the focus pull.
Now this is a planned shot, so it's quite easy to set up. So what about a more run and gun situation?
This was shot during a triathlon in my village. I had set the GH6 up with a follow focus on a tripod with the Ninja V on top in monochrome live view with peaking and sensitivity set to +2.
So this was done using a fully manual lens. But how does a fly-by-wire lens with linear focus differ from a manual lens? Well, it makes it easier and more difficult at the same time. Let me explain. I'll use my Panasonic Leica 100-400 to demonstrate this. First of all, with a lens like this, we can use a combination of autofocus and manual focus by using one push AF. In case of the GH6, this would be pressing the AF on button. Having the camera set to manual focus and pressing that button makes the camera autofocus on whatever is in the focus area that we've set up. I usually use one area or one area plus for that. It's a quick way to grab initial focus and adjust manually from there. So this is what makes using a lens like this easier. However, there's a drawback, especially on longer focal lengths. Let me show you. We can set the focus throw that we want the ring to have, so say maximum for this Panasonic 100 to 400, even though it is linear focus, it is not exactly stepless. The shallower the depth of field and compression, the more noticeable it is. It sometimes makes it hard to nail focus or do a smooth focus pull. Also, you might want to set a different focus throw with different lenses and shooting scenarios, which is an extra step compared to using a fully manual lens. On the other hand, a lens like this can help us to acquire focus quicker, and we can easily switch to autofocus if we need to. It's important to familiarize yourself with the lens that you use, the lenses that you use, the feel and throw of the focus ring, so you have an idea of how much you need to turn the wheel or ring and which way to turn it. It's important to find a comfortable position to stand in and for the hand that's operating the follow focus. We can make minimal movements with the follow focus or focus ring to under and overshoot the focus a little bit to check where the focus is at, with the help of focus peaking, of course. In my opinion, a little bit of over and undershooting of the focus is a lot less jarring than an autofocus system jumping to the background or to another subject and back. So don't be afraid to find your focus by making small turns with the wheel or ring. With all the tools and different lenses, how do we operate? What are some best practices that I found work well? And yes, I'm wearing an easy rig. It makes it easy for me to show things like hand positions and not having to hold the camera. About positions, when we're using a follow focus, it's good to have our elbow close to our body and set the focus wheel to a comfortable position when the system allows for it. When we're not using a follow focus, hand position should be sort of under the lens, similar to the follow focus, and the elbow close to our body. This makes sure that we're keeping the camera as stable as we can while operating the focus ring. If you hold the focus ring on the top, it's like this, it's very likely that we'll get some up and down and some shake of the camera. Also, making small movements is important to keep everything stable. So no big swings on the focus ring or focus wheel when we want to pull focus. If you're using a parfocal zoom lens, that's a lens that keeps focus on the subject whilst zooming, whether that's physically or electronically parfocal, it's a good idea to zoom in, grab focus and zoom back out. This way, you're most likely to have perfect focus on your subject. When your subject is out of frame and coming into frame, we can try to find a focus reference point. So for example, I am out of frame now, but I focused on this, which is in the same focal plane as I will be when I enter the frame. That way we can already nail focus before the subject even enters the frame. The last best practice I have for you is practice, practice, practice. I am also still practicing manual focus and getting better over time. For practicing on a moving subject, we can use something that swings back and forth and try to keep focus on it. In order to get good at it, we have to spend some time doing it. But it's very satisfying when you nail it. I hope this video was helpful. If so, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel and maybe hit that notification bell. And I hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching. Stop maar.